Hey, good morning, church. Pray you're having a good week, enjoying the sunshine. Pretty bright. I'm even in the shade this morning. But hey, have you ever found yourself just disappointed when you've felt like you've tried to love somebody and you didn't really get that same reciprocation? It can be pretty devastating. When you feel like you've tried to share your heart, or just really just ultimately wanted that person to know that they were loved, and it just didn't seem like it was returning to you. Well, I think we all in some capacity have felt that, and it can feel a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot disappointing, especially in times such as this, where I think just so many people are going through so much. As we were just studying through the book of John, these past Sundays, there's a verse that Jesus, really a whole passage that Jesus just prepares his disciples for, and where he's telling them, as you go out into the world, understand that in many cases, if they hated me, they're going to hate you. And, John even later on says, don't be surprised if you see that the world hates you. I don't believe that that's something that's supposed to cultivate a hardness in our heart, where we get to the point of saying, well, mankind is just kind of doomed and that's it. And what's the point in really just going out and trying to display anything of God? That's not what Jesus was wanting to prepare his disciples for. I do believe what he's wanting to prepare us for was to make sure we don't get into a place where we are, easily at a fence, come into a place where we're easily disappointed. And he talks a little bit more about this in Luke chapter 6, where he says, for you to love somebody who loves you in return, what benefit is that for you? For you to pray for somebody who's going to just pray for you in return, what benefit is that to you? He says, but to love somebody else, is to show ultimately the mercy of God. And so he says, therefore, love, do good, and lend without any expectation of return. That word expectation, it really just, the understanding behind it is, don't put your full hope in the return of it. And what I think that really says to us is this: don't let the motivation of your love be whether or not they're going to reciprocate. Our love for somebody else and our motivation to love somebody else cannot be dependent upon their reciprocation. That's not how we measure as to whether or not love is being effective, or as to whether or not we should love. He says instead, know that God himself has even been loving and merciful to evil men and unkind men. He says, but instead be merciful because your heavenly Father is merciful. I think in that is a realignment of where our source has to be. We don't love in order that others might love us back. We don't try to find our identity as to whether or not people love us back. And when we do, we can get real lost. We can get real disappointed, and we can become quite hopeless. So much to the point that I think it's as Jesus describes, in the last days, most men's love will grow cold. It's easy for your love to grow cold when you're expecting somebody to give you some form of love or standard or appreciation. You can just say, well, forget this, what's the point of it? And what Jesus is really wanting to cultivate within his disciples, and in you and me as believers, is this: make sure your motivation of love is because it's good, because it's a display of who the Father is, of who God is, of who Jesus is. Make sure that that's the motivation, is that person sees what love is, because in this world they probably won't from any other source but him. And when that's our motivation, we're plugged into that source. We're doing things because it's good, because that's what he would do, and because that's what he's created us to do. And in that, there's a fullness of satisfaction. We're not limited to just recognize, okay, well, love is good because they love me back. They may not. They may not do good in return. But don't lose hope if that's the case. Don't place your hope in the reciprocation of love. Just love because it's good. And in that, I believe we're going to find freedom like we've we've never been able to experience in anything in the world. So I pray that's an encouragement to you this week. I know that during these times, it can seem tough, and it seems like, maybe everybody's love is just growing cold. Well, take heart in this. He knew that was going to happen, but the commission remains the same. Love as he loved. Be merciful as he is merciful. And in that, trust, put your faith in the fact that you're going to find a fullness of peace and a fullness of satisfaction, because it's who he is. And it just means that you're connecting to who he is, and his love and his compassion, his mercy. So be encouraged with that, church. Seek to love others today, even if it doesn't benefit you, and know that it is doing good and it is revealing who God is to a world that desperately needs to know who he is. All right. I love you, church. Have a blessed week.